Let's officially call this meeting of the Ethics and Election Committee together. It's a few minutes after noon on June 29th, 2018. And we'll start with introductions. We'll start with member training.
Dick Training.
Forrest Dunbar.
Amy Silver.
Dennis Wheeler.
Carolyn Hall.
Eric Croft.
And I'm Chair Pete Peterson. Sorry, I spoke over you.
That's all right. You didn't see me racing in.
Okay, well, we'll start out with some new business. And are you going to provide information, Amy, or is Dennis going to be giving us this information?
We'll take turns.
Yeah.
All right, you may begin.
All right. So, item A, additional drop boxes to be purchased and additional accessible voting centers. This is looking towards next year and whether we want to purchase more boxes and make those available, and whether or not we should open up one or more additional ABCs. With respect to the drop boxes, I know we had some commentary regarding other locations. We're going to try one of those for this election, actually, at this high school. So then we'll have, for this election, 6 drop boxes.
6 drop boxes
Yeah,
for the special election?
Correct. We'll have one at City Hall, the one at Diamond at the last election. We'll have the one at West. We'll have the one at Spinard Rec Center like we did last time. That's 4.
The LUSAC, you're going to have one.
LUSAC,
One at the library and then one here.
Okay.
Yeah, election center.
So we're not buying any new ones, but we put out 6 to make them as convenient as possible. The vendor is a vendor in Washington State that we use for those boxes. They all seem to function well. We can with the door locks and the gates for the usage of them. So we could go back to that same vendor and purchase a few more, or we could put it out and see if there's any other vendors interested.
Mr. Training?
Dennis, was there any evidence of tampering or people trying to drop garbage into the boxes at all the last election?
No.
Okay. So that was one of the things we questioned before. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was going to say, for people sitting over here, I think this is going to have trouble picking you up over the fan, so I'm going to move this down. You also speak up a little bit.
Should we slide down? I'll move around the corner.
I'll come up and hold it. You can move this down.
Yeah, I'll just go a little closer here.
Yeah, I'll go with you. We're going to have more people.
It's a nice sunny day.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Mr. Croft?
And those are they're like permanently on a heavy cement base, and then you bolt them down. How do you secure them?
Yeah, so that was a bit of a surprise actually, because we hadn't asked for that, but O&M did that for us and added the 4-phase one. If we were to do that again, I'd probably change it a little bit. But what they did is they put bolts up through the concrete, and then they welded the nuts down, so you can't.
So it's not an ATM they can steal.
You can break the nuts. I had to on one with a bit of force on a bar. You put a wrench on it and break those welds, but you have to work at it and be prepared to take it on. What we had talked about doing was making them actually permanent in location. Once we settle down on, we really like the spots. You can do a concrete cut and drop them in. But right now, it's been nice to be able to move them, see how they're used. For example, we're talking about maybe moving the Bartlett one either away from Bartlett or over to, or around on the property somewhere better, or maybe over to Cottonwood. Things like that. And it gives us some flexibility right now to be able to see how they're used.
The Begich Middle School was one that I heard suggested for
There's
example.
another location possible. Yeah. Ideally, over time, we'll see more use of the drop boxes and less use of USPS like other jurisdictions see. So if that happens, part of that will be having enough boxes in all the right locations. And then for the ABCs, we added, sort of late in the game, we added the O'Malley ABC, and I think it actually got good usage. So it may be that we want to do that again for next year. We had 5, including this center. For this particular election, we're just going to have one here. But again, for consideration for next year is should we have another one, and if so, where, and then scope out the cost of operating that for your consideration.
Okay, fantastic. Any questions about drop boxes or additional accessible vote centers?
And I believe Barbara was working on a capital funding request for that next year. I'm not sure what the status of that is. I know we've done some pricing on it, but it may be something she'll have to pick up when she gets back for the budget cycle.
Right, and we were discussing possibly adding 3 additional drop boxes, if I remember correctly. Okay, well, let's go down to B. We'll go to vote by mail draft.
I guess that's me. We have,
This is Carolyn Hall Jensen.
yes, this is a draft version of the final vote by mail project. It is unfinished as I wasn't able to complete it because we started preparations for the special election. So you'll note that there are several sections that say more information coming soon. So at this present point, this is where we are at as far as looking at
copy?
as far as looking at the entire project from its inception to the conclusion of the inaugural vote by mail election. So I welcome any comments or questions or suggestions, additions, or anything that should be removed, but this is a working draft in progress.
So members will have time to go over this between now and next month's meeting, and maybe we could bring some feedback on this for next month's meeting. How's that sound?
Please do.
Anything else you want to point out about the report? That you want to mention at this point in time?
Not
Okay, and there's financials in here, suggestions about what the final tally from the first election, and are there suggestions about what the next one might cost?
At this point, financials are not included in this. Financials, as far as my scope of responsibilities, they're outside of my scope.
Okay.
And so at this point, they are not included, but the intent is to be that included as part of the overall report.
All right. And so, I mean, you were communicating and trying to educate the public about the new vote by mail system. Is that ongoing now for this current special election that's coming up fairly soon?
It is, and I actually have a draft communication plan here for your review if you would like to look at it. It's not on the agenda, but I do have a copy of it if you would like to see it.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pass that out to members so they can take a look at that.
You'll notice it's slim compared to the original communication plan from several months ago. That's because it's a lot shorter period of turning around and getting the education effort out there, as well as we don't have the resources that we had for the inaugural election. It's a smaller election. It's one in every district. And our resources are different than what they were.
Yeah. I think, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dunbar.
yeah, I was going to say, I think that because of what you just described and because there is no equivalent of a mayoral election or a ballot initiative, I think we should all expect that turnout in this election will be fairly low. And, you know, hopefully it'll be higher than it otherwise would, but there's almost nothing to measure it against because we haven't done this kind of special election when was the last time they even did one? I don't know if anyone even remembers, because the last time they did one of these kind of elections, there's an interim appointment and they were on the regular ballot, right? When Tim,
That was Tim, right?
yeah,
I can't remember the last time we did a special election.
a just one district special election like this. So I just want everybody to kind of in their mind be prepared, and that should be, you know, we're going to do what we can to increase turnout, but you know, it's going to be low.
But, you know, from a political perspective, this is a good case study for us to see how we can do. Because this is going to happen again. You've got 11 people on the body. It's bound to happen again.
Yep.
So it's a good case study for us to try it out.
Yep.
I think it'll be very interesting to kind of see how this all progresses. We have a couple of things going against us. It's summer in Alaska.
Yep.
People aren't expecting to vote or to be civically engaged.
Expect to be out fishing.
Exactly. also the community councils are in recess until the fall.
Yeah.
But I believe there are several candidates that have filed to run or are intending to run.
Yep.
So those campaigns might, try to activate a bunch of voters and get them out there. I mean, obviously that's their job, and so maybe we'll be surprised by the turnout.
Yep.
Mr. Trainee.
But we are finding some problems out there. For example, Nikki Rose, I think, the president of Sand Lake, got the mail for all the addresses for the community council members and set flyers out to them. So I'm already getting complaints from other people. Why is she doing that?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, community councils are not-for-profit organizations. We only support them in giving them money to do their mail out. They're not part of government. So we may have to look at some way to tweak what we give them. We tell them you cannot give the mail-out list to potential candidates. So I'll let you guys know if I hear any more on this. But they called the ombudsman, wanted him to stop it. The ombudsman can't. And they said, well, who's the chairman now? I said, well, it's not me anymore. It's Forrest, so call him. So you may get a call on this.
Fair enough.
Well, I'm not familiar with Nikki Rose.
She's the president of Sand Lake Community Council.
Okay.
And she's been coming to our homeless committee, representing the Federation.
Yeah. She's there.
Last couple months.
So is she a candidate or something?
Yeah, she's running.
She's running for it.
Tim's seat.
I see the problem now.
Yeah.
The potential
She also
problem.
used the community council Facebook page somehow she shared her. She had the page share her campaign page. There's been some issues, but anyway,
It's something long term we have to take a look at. Is what I'm trying to say for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we may have to take a look at code and after the special election and see if there are a couple of small changes.
Or when we
that need to
refund
be
them
made or
next
something.
year, put it into their funding. It's an option.
Okay.
Okay. So, Dennis, did you want to talk about some
Well,
financials?
financials related to special election, yes.
Special election,
We'll
great.
throw them in here as new business. So preliminary numbers so far, we have the fixed estimate from the printer for the ballot printing. That's $42,000. The mailing, postage for the mailing is $15,000. The Dominion system, which is the ballot scanner system, their quote is $4,500, including on-site support.
For what, Dennis? I'm sorry.
The Dominion ballot scanning system and having two other people here.
Well, we own it, no?
This is the creation of the ballot styles in the system, because they create the ballot and put all the ticks and tags and all the stuff on it. They create that then goes to the printer. And then they set up the database, and then they're here physically on site in case there's any troubleshooting that needs to be done.
What about the Bell and Howell system?
So for the Fluence system, the contract provides for 5 days of on-site support for $10,000, but we're thinking we're not going to need that because the system works well enough that we won't need that on-site support. So rather than commit to spending the $10,000, their hardware tech is in Oregon and can fly up on short notice if that becomes necessary. We have replacement parts on site. In fact, I just replaced one of the trays the other day. Sent it back to him FedEx for repair. And we have a spare on site, so we're good there. The IT service and support can be done by phone, and if we have to, we can. What we do is we unplug that system so it's not hooked to an external source. But if we need to, we can hook it in. They can come in through the MOA firewall to do any troubleshooting if need be. But we're not anticipating that, so rather than commit to that $10,000 expenditure, we'll just do it as needed.
So we sort of have a repair person or an expert on call, basically.
Yeah, originally last year we had a guy that lived here locally. He took his training and took off for Texas, so they don't have an on-site replacement yet for us. So rather than fly up somebody, we had Brian here. I don't know if you remember Brian, a little tall guy. He was here for almost 3 weeks and really had very little to do because nothing broke. So
Well, that's a good thing.
for us, I'd rather not. Assuming it's okay with everybody, my recommendation is not to spend the $10,000.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
What do the
Cost down.
committee members think about not spending the $10,000?
Unless we have to, I wouldn't spend it.
Yeah. The drop-off box costs, that's on your list
Yeah,
for the mover, so she'll have to get that number for you.
Waiting to hear back from them.
And then Barbara had an estimate for the workers. I'm not sure how she broke that out. The guys finished your staffing list, so we should be able to give you an estimate roughly based on that.
We're about at half skeleton crew, and it's somewhere between 25 to 28, including the core group. It's probably more like 32 if you're asking about additions. It's more like about 20 people we're adding.
20,000.
So we'll have 20 people, man?
Oh, that's the number of people, or that's the thousands of dollars?
20 people. I'm talking people.
What, do we have an estimate of dollars?
I have no idea what that would be.
We can try and get that from Rose.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Mr. Trainee?
How many days are we looking at having the workers here? Because it's a real small election.
It is, and because we ramp up slowly, depending upon the need, and we're multi-purposing the staff, generally at the time we drop the ballots, we'll be ramped up. We'll only have maybe about 4 or 5 starting before then. As soon as the ballots are mailed out, then we involve probably another 10 or 12 people at that time, and then they drop them.
Pete, you might want to get with the police department too and security for here. Make sure, since we're going to be having an election, we have them drive by here routinely.
In the evenings?
Yes, make sure it's secure.
I think
Because with the extra daylight, it's easier for people to hide.
Well, the woods are, all the trees are fully
I know.
leaved out, so it's easier to hide probably this time of year. Mr. Dunbar?
Pete, are you planning on having a ethics and election committee meeting in July?
I was. You feel we don't need one, or we?
No. I just want to make sure that you did, because I think then, Barbara won't be back then, but we'll have a more detailed conversation about the costs and also how we do it. I think we're going to have additional. It'll be on our agenda at some point in July or August to fund this election.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
For scheduling purposes, the mail drop is going to be on the 17th, and the first scanning will start on the 20th. So there'll be 2 people here running the scanner. Envelope opening, which usually is a larger number of people.
25th.
The 25th.
So you're talking 17th of August?
July.
July, okay.
Yep. Mail drop on the 17th. First scanning on the 20th. First opening on the 25th. And we'll staff that based on volume, right? So if there's not very much volume, they can be done in 2 hours, or they can be done in 4 hours, or whatever it is, depending on. So they're all hourly. So we'll bring them in and cut them loose based on volume.
Mr. Trainee?
Dennis, the mail out of the envelopes, are we going to mail them to everybody, or are we restrict it to ones that were not rejected with the last election? Because we had a bunch that came back to us undeliverable. Are we still going to mail out to those people?
So we got the first data load from the state. My staff person took a quick look and says there's at least 20-some thousand undeliverables in that list. So that hopefully reflects all the undeliverables that we gave to the state. So as those envelopes came in, we scanned them, we gave all that data to the state updates that, it changes their status according to their purge process. So hopefully that will reduce the mail out waste, if you will, significantly for this one. We'll
Thank
see.
you.
They may, it's somewhat dependent on where the state has that particular voter in the purge process, but hopefully the work we've done, from all indications, will help the state give us more accurate data.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
on that point, I know that we have roughly 35,000 registered voters, according to the data look that we did based on the last election. With the state data that I got today, when we run it through the GIS process, we'll have a refined number for you in terms of the actual number of mail-out packages that are going to send.
You're talking
We're just-
35,000 in the district that's for the special election?
From the last election, there were 35,425 registered voters. When we run the GIS process on Monday, we'll have a better number for you in terms of what we're going to mail out for this election to that same
So-
district.
Pete, that'll affect the cost, because we have to send less ballots out, less mail out.
And so that reminds me of printing. So how much time is this going to be? A pretty short turnaround for the printing company, or?
Yeah, because we have to give them the first data on the 9th, and then the state will finish its update of the voter registration database on the 13th. That is because voters have 30 days out from the election to register or update.
Correct.
The state takes 5 days to process any updates and changes, so that puts it to the 13th, and they drop the mail on the 17th, so that weekend is going to be a little crazy for the printer, because we're going to give them catch-ups and yanks based on that last update of state data. Now, it probably could be very small. It might be just a few hundred new records or updated records. So, but yeah, it's going to be really tight.
That's a pretty small window, though.
Yeah.
Mr. Croft?
I'm sorry, how many ballots do you think you're going to print, or you don't know?
We don't know exactly until we give them the data, but the estimate for the 42,000 in printing was based on an order of about 35 to 40,000. Because what they do is they give us the printing for the mail out, plus we stock a bunch of ballots here for the ABC. So with 35,000 registered voters, we told them we wanted an order of 40,000 ballots pre-printed, ready to go.
And what was the final numbers on turnout? That is, what's your guess of how many votes we'll get in this election?
Like Mr. Dunbar was saying earlier, it's a crapshoot. It's summertime. It's just the one district. I really don't know what to expect.
What was the final percentage on overall last time?
42.7 or something, is that correct?
For overall turnout, it was 36.6.
But West Anchorage is probably higher,
Probably.
right? Because Midtown and East Anchorage are lower.
And we can pull that data for you if you'd like it.
Well,
Is that based on registered voters or the number we sent that was of the registered voters?
It's usually based on the registered numbers, and I've always thought to myself that that's the turnout percentage is lower than what it actually really should be calculated, because you're including all these people that ultimately end up as undeliverable, right? So
I'd be interested in those three numbers, right? What we thought of as overall registered voters, how many ballots we sent, and then how many votes we got. Because I think you're right, that probably the turnout number on the sent versus cast would be more.
Would be lower.
yeah, so
Because some of the 20,000,
right. So last election we sent out, let's say it was like I think somewhere around 198,000. To me, the data indicated your actual live registered, able to vote people was closer to 170 something, which explained why we got so many undeliverables back. Do you want it for the entire election and also then specifically for this district?
Yeah, I'd like just those 5 to 10 numbers. You gave me a third one, right? So it's total registered, we sent, and I guess how many got under. Some way I can get my head around. Here's what you just did on the thumbnail. 170 is the kind of good number, and we got 100 cast or whatever we got.
so are you thinking that 35 or 40,000 is a low number?
I'm just trying to get my head around.
I mean, it's your district, you
Right.
have more knowledge of it than I do.
it sort of doesn't matter if it's low or high, right? We have to send one to almost every register.
Yeah, the only ones that
Anyone
were
except
excluded are
for
the ones that you identified by
non-deliverable.
code that we asked to exclude by code. So
Yeah.
the known undeliverables and the ones that were purge, I believe it was, PN purge. So to hit those numbers again, we sent out 198. That's lower than the 218,000 because we excluded those ones that were undeliverable anyway. And then after we sent out 198,000 roughly, we got another 21,000 back as undeliverable again, which is why I say the true number is more like 170,000 somewhere.
So there were potentially
Right.
40,000 undeliverables in some sort of classification.
Yeah, either we knew it up front or they ended up being undeliverable once we ran the election. Yeah, because the voters don't update their information.
Right.
It's always a voluntary system, largely. So if you took those percentages, maybe you could roughly apply that to West Anchorage and see how it looks, but we'll get the data for you.
Okay, great. Forrest?
Yeah, a couple of questions and then a comment, sort of an update from my colleagues. So you had mentioned that the first mail was sent out on July 17th. So remind me when registration closes, because that needs to happen, far enough in advance where you can print the ballots.
Isn't it July
right? So
8th?
8th, I think it's the 8th.
July 8th.
July 8th,
So that
which
is
is a couple days.
So you only have 9 days to create the ballots, print them, and get them ready to mail, right?
Well, we'll be ready to create the ballot once the candidacy date and the ability to withdraw closes.
Oh, so it's even tighter than that.
Yeah, so candidate filing closes on Tuesday, July 3rd. And also for withdrawing is on the 3rd as well at 5 p.m. And so once I get that, I finish it out and send it to Dominion so that they can create the
Oh,
ballot.
so the 3rd is when registration closes.
For filing for office,
Yes.
registration, yeah.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. I was talking about candidates.
Oh.
So candidate filing closes on July 3rd.
July
so we
3rd.
we have 2 weeks to get ready.
Yep.
What was I going to say? This is kind
Brilliant,
of,
probably.
what's that?
It was brilliant, probably.
No. Oh, on the interim appointment, this is for my colleagues, and I think it's relevant to this, but not directly connected. So I believe that the challenge period also ends on the 3rd for interim appointments.
That one, I believe so, at 5 p.m.
Yeah. And so at 5:05 p.m., we're going to send, if no one is challenged, at 5:05 p.m., we're going to send out a press release that says we're scheduling a special meeting on Tuesday the 10th. I'm going to call a special election on Tuesday the 10th. Now, in our resolution, we set out to Thursday the 12th because if there had been a challenge, there was we had to wait a certain number of days, and we pushed it out to then. But if there are no challenges, we can do it as soon as the 10th.
So you move to the 10th?
So I move it to the 10th, and then we'd have our process then. We'd interview the candidates, we'd vote on the interim appointment, and then I would cancel the meeting on the 12th. But I want, to get the interim person seated as quickly as possible. There'll be some action on this on the 3rd and 4th. Or, I guess 2nd and 3rd, yeah.
And through the chair, so we do have one more person that is qualified for the interim.
So he did
And
qualify.
So he did. So I'm going to send out that email to the assembly members shortly, probably after.
Who's
this
that?
meeting.
Who's the one?
The last one is William Tremaine.
So we weren't sure if he was actually lived in the district long enough was the
Yes,
issue?
that was the issue.
And he provided a utility bill, I
So
think?
that gives us
His leasing agreement.
so that gives us a total of what, 6 or 7 now? 7?
Yep.
All right, well, we definitely will have some choices to make at that special meeting, won't we?
Yep.
Any other discussion on financials?
Pair of brothers.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough choice.
All right, well, I guess we'll move along to C on our agenda and have a discussion about Saturday as the ending day to accept ballots. I think this is something that was brought up at our last meeting, and we actually might need to get a change in state law to allow that.
Is that right? I'm just following up.
I'm not sure. I haven't. We'll go check the state code.
You were a legislator.
They were both legislators.
I don't recall that. Pete and I don't really remember that.
Through the chair, for speaking specifically to the local elections, I do not believe it requires a state law change because it's a home rule. There may be some reference in Title 29 regarding elections on Tuesday, but with regard to our ability as a home rule, we can change that. So it would just be a question of changing our code. I did not check the charter, but I believe it's code driven.
And so what if the state constitution specifically states Tuesday? Would that only be for
State
state
elections.
elections, or would that supersede and require us to be over Tuesday?
I'd have to look. I'm not aware that the Constitution would drive local elections to a Tuesday.
Okay. Just wondering. Mr. Crawford.
Yeah, so I appreciate you putting this on, and maybe I'll just ask Dean to draft it up, and sometimes that answers these questions, right? He comes out and he says, oh, no, I can't because these things, or here's the problem. So you sort of put a straw man out to see. I still, at least theoretically, think it's a better system. You sort of, I think Tuesday's just a weird relic of farmers and stuff, and when you physically had to get somewhere after being in church on Sunday and ride your horse on Monday and whatever. But I maybe I'm wrong on that, but I can't see logically, and having a whole week where you can mail it in, and sort of Saturday as the catch-up day, if you didn't do it, sit at your coffee table and get it done and probably hand it in that day, makes the most sense to me.
Well, if we were going to end the election day on Saturday, the drop boxes would still be available until 8 p.m. or midnight or whatever time we decided the cutoff was on that particular
Yeah,
day.
certainly you could staff it, because, what we do now is we send people out in the morning to check for the previous day, and then that night to empty and close them up. So that wouldn't be a problem.
Plus the mail's delivered on Saturday too.
Right.
But
Training?
we're something new with this vote by mail, so let's try it Saturday. See what works better for us. There's
Right.
nothing written in Holy Script that I know of have to do on Tuesday.
Well, we're not doing it on this special election.
Not this one, but I'm talking about
Sure.
future ones.
So do you want to contact Dean and see
Yeah,
if he
I'll
might
do
be
that.
willing to do that? Thank you.
Or perhaps use the Department of Law if you can at one of Becky's people, because I think Dean is starting to get
Is Dean
close
back
to
there?
Overloaded?
maxed out. Yeah, somebody keeps giving him tons of ordinances to write.
Can you imagine?
I've done that for how many years, okay?
Well, fair enough.
He writes well.
Yeah.
Any other discussion about Saturday as the election day, final day?
I do. I support Mr. Croft's, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I like Mr. Croft's idea. I do think that I remember us having a short conversation about this before, and there being a number of logistical challenges, but I can't remember if that was related to the fact that this particular special election had weird dates, or if Saturday itself creates some challenges. And I remember it also got kind of conflated with the idea of return postage and postmarks and that kind of thing as well. Because the mail is only picked up once on Saturday, I think. And I think there might be some challenges there. But if it's in the box, that's what it was. So if somebody dropped it in a mailbox on Saturday at 7 p.m., there'd be no way to tell if it was dropped on a Saturday or a Sunday, because it's not collected till Monday, right? And so in theory, people could also just drop it on Sunday and then get postmarked basically that Monday. And there's not really anything we can do about it.
Well, we would have to communicate to the voters that if you are going to put it in the mail, it has to be there by a certain hour, or otherwise it couldn't.
They did get the international
slip through the
airport.
cracks.
They got a post office there. It's open.
Well, they're
Till about 11 at
not
night.
24/7 anymore at the international. I think
And
they're
then
open
they
till
would be-
11.
And then they would be, and they could always drop it in the Dropbox and we collect it twice, and the last time could be at 8 or midnight. I think those are challenges, but I agree with Mr. Croft that those are not like challenges that are so large that they should outweigh the potential benefit of getting more people
Not
to
insurmountable.
drop their box. Yeah, and also if let's say if someone did drop their ballot on a Sunday and we wanted them to drop it on a Saturday, and somehow that got in, it's not, so long as they weren't otherwise committing voter fraud, that, it gives them a little bit of unfair advantage in theory, but it still is sort of expressing the will of the voters, and a particular voter. It's not as nefarious as some other forms of vote tampering.
Okay.
On that point, we did have ballots that were delivered to the post office, but the post office did not mark it for the next day. But we were able, there was an orange marking provided by the post office machine, and there were a few of those that we were able to determine through working with the post office that we were able to count, actually.
Right.
And so the post office has been telling us they're working on initiatives, and this is not just locally, this is for all jurisdictions. They're working on initiatives to improve what they're doing to get better data and process them quicker, so that this problem doesn't come up where somebody drops it off on the right day, but it's not getting marked for the next day.
So you're telling me that the U.S. Post Office might be innovating?
That's what they're telling us, yes, sir.
Isn't that amazing? Mr. Trainee.
Dennis, are we going to have to do anything special for people that are not in this town, postmarked coming from out of country? Think about the military that are deployed. There may be some military.
Yeah, so under federal rules, they get mailed out earlier. It's 45 days, I think, the ballots. We don't have that requirement because we're only doing local elections. But we have talked about trying to improve what we do and build in a timeline that better accommodates. Because we had a lot of envelopes come back and it was just too late. And we need to find ways to improve that.
Well, I thought it was the postmark, though. Are they not postmarked? Is that the issue? The
Well,
international
both
mail?
they're not being postmarked in time, and even if they were postmarked in time, they're coming after the public session of canvas.
Oh, like really late.
Yeah, so
Well, in this case,
both of those things end up disqualifying.
haven't we've set the, I don't know if this is in code or just something we did, but the canvas is pretty late after the special election, or is that always the
It's a little
normal,
bit
like-
later.
It is a week
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
We had 294 ballot envelopes returned postmarked after Election Day on the election
Chairman.
this spring. So,
Can I add something on the special election?
yes, Mr. Dunlap.
Just something to sort of socialize people to the activists that are talking to you. And this just reminded me, I think we've set the time frame to be a little longer in terms of when they're received and when they're counted. To deal with some of the logistical challenges and the fact we're running with a skeleton crew. So just to socialize people that you're not going to necessarily get the results as fast as you might at the previous election. And I remember talking to Barbara about that and felt it was more important to try to use the resources we have and maybe push it out a little bit.
So tamper down expectations a little bit.
Yeah, if someone were like, the next day, don't expect to have everything counted the next day, like you might in years past. The special election is going to take a little longer to count, perhaps.
Well, I mean, the number of ballots will be less we anticipate, but when they come in, there's no way to know when that.
And we'll have
that's
far fewer staff.
True. Anything additional? So let's go to other issues. Signatures scanned by humans versus optical scanning.
Mr. Chairman, I think what this is asking is how the signatures are judged, whether they match or not. There was a component that we could buy for that sorter that adds a computer first step adjudication. And what you do is you set the parameters in the software, and it looks for indicators. It says, okay, if it hits these indicators, is that a 75% match or 80% match? Whatever that is, you set that. So it does an initial screen based on that, and it'll say yes or no. And then you add a human review to that. And so you could say a human reviewer will see everything that's rejected, or a human reviewer sees the whole subset, just a second layer. And right now, our human adjudication is two steps. So there's an initial reviewer, and then a different person does the second review. So if you bought the computer-aided feature, you could have three reviews: a computer review that does a first cut, and then the two human reviews. That software, I believe, was somewhere in the $30,000 to $50,000 range. To do
That's
to
the
that
number that I had
out.
written
We
down.
left it off because of cost when we were scoping out this project. I'm not. 2 years ago when we were looking at this, I don't recall there was any jurisdiction that relied solely on computer adjudication of signatures. I don't know what the current state of the art is now, whether, for example, Colorado having adopted it, I don't know if they're using solely computer-aided review or not.
Mr. Training.
I guess I would trust a review, but I don't want the computer to be the final determinant for it. If we had to filter to begin with, that's fine. But Alaskans don't really like trusting computers, as we found out with various things.
Sure. Mr. Pearson, so if we were to purchase this for the purpose of making things faster, so you have the computer and then one human review, that to me makes more sense than having a computer and the same number of human reviewers, unless we thought there was a real epidemic of people trying to falsify signatures. So my question is, how many cases of people attempting to falsify signatures did we have in the last special election that we
I
suspect?
can remember
He's
there
gonna drag it
were
forward.
2, maybe.
Were they were falsified, or they were like mistaken?
It was a family member signing for another family member.
Okay.
There was a dad who signed for his daughter, I think.
Did we catch that?
Yeah.
And then he
called.
He called on
He helped us out.
Okay. So out of 78,000, how many? 79,000 ballots. We had one.
Or 2. If we don't, yeah.
We did have one person that voted it was deceased, so we assumed there was probably something, a
Either a
mistake made
miracle
there.
or
Probably wasn't it like a junior got it or something like that.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember specifically, but there was an issue with the junior, but I don't remember if that was a signature attempt or what.
I think they both got the same ballot in the same, post office location, and the father voted his son's ballot. And then he found out and decided he was going to vote his other ballot. He said, well, then I'd actually be voting twice. So he called to let us know, I believe
Yeah,
that's
that
what
sounds,
happened.
that sounds more familiar to me than something just purely fraudulent.
So, I mean, I don't know whether the only difference is the middle initial. My grandfather and my father's first and last name were the same. The only difference was the middle initial. And so if somebody didn't have a middle initial on there, then that did cause occasional confusion.
Yeah, to the best of our knowledge, that was not an issue. The larger issue actually turned out to be people who voted 2 ballots, and the scenario is that they had planned to be out of state, so we mailed the ballot that direction, or they got their ballot early and then went out of state and asked for another one. Well, they ended up making a request for another ballot, but voted them both. Like, well, I'm going to go over here, but I got my one in Anchorage, so I went and voted that one, and then I voted that one, which the system catches as duplicates. And one of the things we're doing to solve that is we're going to, when we have to mail out a second ballot, we're going to apply a stamp to the envelope so it makes it much more clear that that's the replacement one. And some of our noticing to make it more clear, do not vote the first one. If you've asked for a second one.
So the initial one in the system would be immediately eliminated.
Yeah, the process is as
Only
soon
accept
in the
the
process
first
of
one.
sending a second ballot, the first one gets voided.
Right.
So
Mr. Training?
This is an ongoing process. I think it would be better with every election. There are these things that happen because a lot of us aren't used to it yet. I think we did really well for the first election. We'll perfect this one even better with this special election.
Well,
So I appreciate your work, Dennis.
it's ongoing education. You know, I mean, we talked about this before we switched, that it wasn't going to just be overnight and everybody was going to understand and know exactly how it was going to work, especially people who've been voting at the ballot box for 50 years or more. And so we have to be willing to, to expect that we're going to have to educate and re-educate till everyone's on board.
I think it's really going to affect the state with their upcoming primary in general. Because Alaska, I think you're right, so now used to voting by mail. It's going to be funny when they're told, oh, you've got to go stand in line.
So yeah, that just made me happen to think we're having our special election in July, ending in August, and then they've got state has their primary coming up. Are we expecting any confusion?
Mm-hmm.
we are,
yeah.
and actually we've been working with the state to try to avoid that. For example, there's been talk about providing a drop box at the state's offices on Gamble because they have a lot of walk-in traffic there, but I think the decision's been not to do that, to avoid people putting envelopes for the wrong election in the wrong place. But who's been...
Amy?
Yeah, so she has more information.
Yeah, and through the chair, we're going to have a just a silver ballot box that's decorated with Muni things. So Anna is going to be decorating that, and then it'll be at the Gamble office. And so if somebody a voter from District 3 goes in there and wants to turn in their envelope, then the state can go ahead and take it and put it into that locked box. But, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Carolyn?
I've also been in touch with the Division of Elections Communications Manager. She and I are meeting weekly telephonically to discuss our various outreach communications to make sure that we're not interfering, and we're looking for ways to collaborate so that Anchorage voters have a better understanding of what they're supposed to be doing with each election. We're also, with the help from the Gamble office, they are allowing us to have some of our outreach materials available on hand for when voters, I'm sure, will be showing up wanting to find out more information about the special election. Instead of turning them away with nothing, they will have materials to hand them so that they are better informed for the special election.
Great, I think that's a great idea. And great anticipation. Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know,
Dennis?
on the signatures, in terms of adding the computer feature, I guess that would have to be something that comes up when you guys talk about capital spending. So I don't know.
well, this definitely is not going to be taking place before the special
Right.
election. It'll be
Right.
something we might want to consider for next April's regular municipal election. So yeah, we can put that on next month, or maybe 2 months from now. Put on that agenda. Okay, let's go down to D2, chain of custody on post office pickups.
Mr.
Dennis?
Chairman, what we did for the last election is we had a special post office box. We used a special mailing ID. We had teams of 2 go to the post office and bring the mail back here. Normally Steve at City Hall does mail pickup, but for our elections, we had teams here that did that work. So the intention is to keep doing the same thing in that regard. They're going teams of 2 to pick up the mail and bring it here. So the post office segregates it for us, and then we do the pickup once a day.
And so how did they do it this April? Or is this going to be a change in the way they used to do
Nope,
it?
Same way we did in April. Yeah, teams of 2 will go pick up in the morning.
And we didn't think that there was a problem with chain of custody in the April election, or we did think there was a problem?
I'm not sure how this got on the agenda. I'm not aware of any issues.
Carolyn?
My recollection is that Ms. Domboski saw a Facebook post of ours on our clerk's office page, and it led her to believe that there were possible issues with chain of custody. So I believe that's the genesis of the concern. When we go for Dropbox pickups, it's always 2 election workers. They're always together, and they put all of the return envelopes into a black duffel bag that is meant for ballot return envelopes, and then that duffel bag is locked shut. There are a number of other procedures associated with the process as well. So I believe that is the reason for this, just kind of examining is there an area of improvement for the USPS pickup, perhaps, because the picture was the ballots are in those white, clear post office trays, and we're talking, at times as many as 13 post office trays that are full, and so those are stacked into the back of an election worker's vehicle, and then they're brought here, and then unloaded over here at garage door.
Mr. Chairman, some jurisdictions actually GPS monitor their election workers as they go to drop boxes back. They have timed routes. We have not imposed or set that requirement. I believe at least one jurisdiction may provide cell phones for that purpose. So again, to do something of that nature would require an expense, and I'm just not sure if there's a justification.
But the post office, when they deliver it, they have just one person in the truck that brings it, or are there 2 people?
2 people leave here, they go to the post office, they do the pickup, and they come back here.
Okay.
If someone doesn't deliver it here, we pick it up.
Yeah, we pick it
Oh,
up.
that we pick it up, okay.
Through the chair, can I add that the election workers that go and pick up at the post office, they're on a list, and so not any election worker can go to the post office. They go through a process of working with the post office and just having them on a list, so we have specific workers that do that.
So they've been trained, so they know exactly what's acceptable.
Yeah, and as an example, the last April election, when we did have a number of these trays that had to be picked up from the post office, we sent extra election workers to pick up the mail. Post office would not release those envelopes, but only to the people that were registered to pick up mail. So, as evidence of chain of command, they were only going to release it to specific people.
All right, good. Great. Well, that's thinking ahead. That's anticipating a potential weakness in the system, so that was well done. Anything else about chain of custody that we discussed at this point in time? All right. Well, let's go down to number D3, the success of the cure letters. And is that you, Dennis, or?
Sure, I think, Cindy, we can speak to it. Maybe in your data, too, there were, I apologize if I get this number correct, but I believe there was hundreds of people that cured because they got the cure letter regarding their signature.
Registration?
Either they forgot to sign, or we didn't have a sig match, or if ID was required, we didn't follow up.
I can't remember the exact number.
Yeah, we sent out a lot more letters than were actually responded to, but I think given that we had hundreds that did respond, I think it's still a worthwhile process. We generate the letters here. What happens is the Fluent system creates an Excel file report of the adjudication of the signature. The signature is missing or doesn't match, whatever it is. That Excel file is then merged into a Word document, mail merge letter. They print them off and put them in envelopes. The envelopes are pre-addressed, so they can print them off and mass through that mail merge. And then I don't know if they're mailed directly out of here. I can't remember if you guys taken them up to City Hall. but that's the process. And we've basically promised to try to get those out within 3 days of receiving an envelope, which is why we're starting scanning on the 20th, because if people drop off their ballot as early as the 17th, we want to scan those soon enough so we can adjudicate them soon enough to get the cure letters out soon enough so they have plenty of time to cure their an early voter.
Sounds good.
So, are we using the same letter that we used earlier, or have we made some
We changed the dates.
amendments to it other than the change of the dates?
There has been some refinement, and Renata Hoskins, who will be starting next week as our lead for the review and resolution team, I believe has made suggested changes just for clarity, clarification. So not only the date, but also to the body of the letter. And I believe Barbara had input on that. After the April election, turning around as many things such as that as possible.
Well, fantastic. Any other discussion or questions about the cure letter?
Nope.
All right. Well, we're down to old business on our agenda. Anything else anyone can think of, new, old, or indifferent? Mr. Cross.
On old business, Barbara and I had talked, and I wanted to make sure I got the full list. I'm building up to having a legislative committee. And so what change, any of you guys, what changes would you want in state law for us to ask for? If you could redo it, what changes in state law? She mentioned, I don't have my list here, but that allowing the USPS change of address form to be an accepted way to change your registration. And then there were a couple of, but what, if I put hey, we've done vote by mail, here are these 4 things we need you to change state, what would it be?
Good
Mr.
question.
Wheeler.
I'm sorry, that wasn't on my radar, so I'm trying to think of.
If you want to, you can
Yeah.
you can send me and maybe Pete as the chair of this committee.
Sure.
What the must-have and the kind of likes, maybe.
I think from my perspective, if there were ways to improve the purge process that would be acceptable to people, acceptable to the general public, so that the purge can happen a little sooner in our process, because and I don't know if the state can make this happen, but obviously they conduct an election in November. They have data regarding undeliverables. They typically don't look to get that completely through their system until March. This last year they put some extra staff to it. Were able to give us data in February, but again, because of all the undeliverables that we see, it'd be nice to figure out if there's a state law change that would be needed in their time frames to improve that for us, because of holding elections in April really backs us up into problems of timeliness. That would be one.
Well, that would have to go through the State Affairs Committee down at Juneau in the House and the Senate. We could take a look and see who the current chair is in the Senate and see if he's up on for re-election or not, or she. And
Current chair in the House is Jonathan Christ Tompkins,
right.
Sitka, who is very familiar with this stuff. He was one of the co-sponsors of PFT automatic voter registration.
Anyway, let us know, and then we'll do it in that. And the only other thing, Mr. Chairman, I had was I'd like us to look, but not until we are done with the special election and evaluate it, what changes we want for interim appointment and these kind of special elections. So I know you'll probably do it, but I'd appreciate in September, October, a meeting that looks at. But it is possible that we say, the big complicated process doesn't work for the short appointment, and that stays in code for when we have the one we had before, where Harry gave notice in November, and that triggered a process that had some time to it. But this thing that forces us to do it within 60 days, you could say Assembly can just do another thing. Can just do it.
I think because of that.
Mr. Dunbar.
So I know that Barbara was already working with, I'm trying to remember who it was, thinking about the special election process as well.
Yeah.
And I think there are 2 or 3 things we need to do. One, I think, is what Mr. Croft is saying. I think another thing we can think about seriously is offering a charter amendment that extends that 60 days to 90 days or whatever we think is appropriate, because these elections are much larger and more complicated when those provisions were originally created. Even if we had not gone to vote by mail, it still would be problematic, and that would that would also make the interim appointment a little bit more substantive, right? And then in addition to that, I think, again, kind of what Mr. Croft said, even if we did that with that extended process, we should revise the special, the interim process, which I believe can be done just with code without having to fiddle with the charter. And I agree that making it faster to get that person stood up quicker, I think, is in the interest of public policy.
Make the appointment quicker?
Yeah, I mean, just so they can get on the ground. And I mean, what we're doing right now is we're waiting for, for someone to challenge it, for example. And we had to wait quite a long time before we could even open the application process, I think. Or no, actually, no, we were able to open that pretty quickly, but we had to keep it open for a while.
And we had a 5-5 vote in the interim, right? We had, so it wasn't just theoretical.
No, that's right.
We thought 5-5 would be theoretical, but it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, it happened almost immediately.
That's why they put an odd number of this.
That's why they wanted us to be odd.
We could also let the mayor cast a tie-breaking vote, but that would be a little
No.
bigger change.
No.
That would probably end up being controversial, I would
I
imagine.
think it would require.
You meant like this, Mayor, but the last one you would not want them to have a vote.
Well, it's just, I
on
mean,
any
look,
of
there
it.
are lots of legislative bodies in this country that have an even number of
I
people,
know,
like
but
the
they're
US
different form of
Senate
government
and,
than we do.
yeah, and the state house, state senate. Okay.
All right. Any other discussion of election issues that anyone has on the top of their head that we can talk about right now? Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, just an update. We met, leaving this group, met with Dean and Becky from the Municipal Attorney's Office, and we'll do so again sometime in the near future as we can to look at changes. To look at changes to our Title 28 code based on our April experience. So I'm not sure when a draft would come to the committee, but the goal is to take that experience, suggest some updates, and try to get that done for the next regular election.
Okay. Great. Well, we can expect that on our agenda one of the next upcoming months. Dean gets a chance to draft that when he finishes all the legislation and Mr. Training's requested.
I've got a short time frame to get this all done, okay?
I understand that next April's coming around rather quickly.
See?
Right.
Given schedules, I wouldn't expect a draft until
This fall.
late. Yeah.
Okay. And that makes sense. Because we may see some things in the special election that we would want to include in that as well. So. All right, any other old business? Well, then I guess we'll go to audience participation.
Audience participation. Gene?
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself, all the public process. Public process on appropriate decision made by the governing bodies more likely to public interest. I live in Manchester in the Valley. First of all, again, I raised concern in previous meetings having the meeting here. It's very difficult for people to hear. Even an assembly member toward the end of the meeting noted it's difficult to hear. It was difficult for me to hear Dennis. But it's also having fun with everybody here. So I encourage you to meet in different locations so that people can hear in the meeting, including members present. Second thing is you have the word introductions. It's audience introductions that I raised so you can recognize the people from the audience that are here. There's words of roll call to announce what assembly members are present at this meeting. I don't see that as a normal thing. And then let's go on the thing. This is an election meeting. Financial report, particularly to the cost of the election that the city is walking into. One would have thought that would have been a written report. This was addressed and requested to get a financial cost of this election, and it was addressed at the previous meeting of this committee. And instead, we get a verbal report. It's not a complete report. It's more appropriate to have a detailed account if there's certain factors missing and not do a verbal thing. So clearly, you understand, and everyone present, what's going on, what the cost of the election is, and you're walking into unexpectedly. And Another thing is 2 missing people are not present. Now, I'm not knocking these 2 people, but I think the 2 critical people that are not present in this meeting, Barbara Jones and municipal clerk in charge of the elections, and the assembly attorney. I noticed that there were the referrals to the laws, and Dennis was the one that was speaking on it, and it would have been more appropriate that those 2 people here. There might have been some conflicts or whatever, and I hope everyone is okay with those 2 people, but those are 2 critical parties that should have been in this room. And if there was a difficulty having them in this room for this meeting, then have it at a different time so that you get directly to the people who are involved with the legal issue, and also the ones that the principal party that's in charge of the election. And that was a missing thing. And then I guess that's it, except that this passing out of information, you forget the public, and I had to say something, and you should recognize the public, and also having it passing during the meeting and not way in advance. And there's no clear idea of the public. All they know is your meeting, but there's no agenda on the meeting website to know what you're going to be discussing. Now, if they see these items there, there've been more of a interest to know, hey, maybe I should attend the meeting on a particular item it's going to be discussing. But the public has no clear picture unless they're physically here to hear what you have to say. And then I don't see what I have to say except after I finish my statements, and generally there's a general thing of end the meeting and no response to what I say, and it appears to be what we call a policy of indifference to what I say, and just business as usual. And that's it. Thank you. My 3 minutes is up.
Mr. Dunbar.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I'm good.
Would we like to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.